12 unspoken signals that you're healing without even realizing it. Carl Jungian, the hidden laboratories of your soul. Something ancient stirs. You may not feel it yet. This quiet revolution that unfolds beneath the surface of your days, beyond the reach of your conscious mind's restless questioning. But it is there, working with the patience of geological time, the persistence of roots breaking through stone. The alchemists of old understood this mystery. In their darkened chambers, surrounded by crucibles and retorts, they knew that the most profound transformations happen not in the blazing furnace of dramatic revelation, but in the gentle, sustained heat of inner work. They called it the opus contra naturam, the work against nature. Yet paradoxically, it was the most natural thing of all, the soul's return to its authentic form. You are living through such an opus now, though you may mistake its quiet progress for stagnation, its subtle shifts for mere coincidence. The first signal of your healing announces itself not with trumpets, but with the soft sound of something loosening, old certainties beginning their gentle dissolution, like morning mist surrendering to the inevitable light. Notice how the rigid truths you once held about yourself have begun to soften at their edges. Those absolute declarations, I am this, I am not that, I will always, I will never. They no longer carry the weight of granite monuments. Instead, they hover like vapor, still present but somehow less solid, less tyrannical in their demands upon your becoming. This is the prima materia of your transformation, not the addition of something new, but the dissolution of what was never truly solid to begin with. Jung understood that we must first return to chaos before we can know our true order. The alchemists called this stage nigredo, the blackening, the putrefaction of old forms so that new life might emerge. But your nigredo is not the dramatic darkness of mythology. It is subtler, more compassionate. It arrives as a gentle questioning of the stories you've told yourself, a quiet wondering if perhaps, just perhaps, you might be more than the sum of your historical wounds, your accumulated failures, your carefully catalogued limitations. You find yourself pausing in conversations where you once would have rushed to define yourself. The old reflexive responses, those automatic declarations of unworthiness, inadequacy, or fixed identity, they falter on your tongue. Not because you've consciously decided to change them, but because something deeper has shifted. Some fundamental premise has begun its slow dissolution. This is your psyche performing its secret work. The way trees draw nutrients from soil in winter darkness, preparing for a spring they cannot yet imagine. The unconscious, that vast intelligence Jung recognized as our truest guide, has begun its patient labor of liberation. It works without your permission, without your understanding, without your control, and this is its greatest gift. You may notice that your dreams have grown softer, less urgent in their symbolic warnings. Where once your sleep was populated by anxiety's familiar cast of characters, the endless chase scenes, the crumbling foundations, the forgotten examinations, now there are quieter images. Open doors, vast skies, hands releasing what they know, longer need to hold. This is the alchemy of letting go, not as conscious decision, but as natural consequence. Like autumn leaves that do not choose to fall, but simply reach the moment when holding on requires more energy than release. You are approaching your own season of necessary surrender. The old self, that careful construction of adaptations and defenses, begins to recognize its own impermanence, and in this recognition lies the first whisper of freedom. Not the freedom of escape, but the deeper liberation of no longer needing to maintain the exhausting fiction of fixed identity. You are becoming acquainted with what the mystics have always known, that the self we think we are is but a temporary arrangement, a constellation of experiences that can be rearranged, reimagined, reborn. The alchemical transformation happens in stages, each one preparing the ground for the next. What you experience now is the initial softening, the gentle warming that precedes the great work. Your rigid self-definitions are entering their mercurial phase, becoming fluid, adaptable, open to new configurations. You might feel this as a strange loosening in your chest, a sense that the tight knot of who I am has somehow become less constricted. Old resentments that once defined your emotional landscape begin to feel less compelling, not because you've forgiven or forgotten, but because they no longer seem to fit the contours of this emerging self. This is healing announcing itself through absence rather than presence, the absence of old compulsions, the missing edge of familiar pain, the surprising quiet where inner criticism once roared. Your soul has begun its gentle work of archaeology, carefully excavating the authentic self from beneath the sedimentary layers of adaptation and survival. The transformation is so gradual, so natural, that you might attribute these changes to external circumstances, to luck, to the simple passage of time. But the alchemists knew better. They understood that when the work begins, everything becomes medicine. Every encounter, every challenge, every moment of stillness becomes part of the sacred process of becoming. You are the alchemist now, though you work without formulas or conscious intention. Your laboratory is the ordinary terrain of daily life. Your materials, the raw substance of human experience. And in this most humble of settings, the most profound of miracles quietly unfolds. The transformation of suffering into wisdom, of wound into sacred scar, of lead into gold. The first signal has been given. The work has begun. In the quiet chambers of your inner world, something profound is shifting, a loosening of chains you didn't even know were binding you. The shadow, that dark companion who has walked beside you through every corridor of your existence, is beginning to speak in tongues you've never heard before. Where once there was the harsh crack of condemnation, now there emerges something softer, more worn, like the voice of an ancient storyteller whose tales have grown gentle with the telling. You feel it first in the spaces between thoughts, in those liminal moments when the mind settles into stillness. The familiar chorus of self-recrimination that once rose like a violent storm at the slightest provocation now whispers with the exhaustion of a long campaign, finally drawing to its close. The inner critic, that relentless prosecutor who has built his case against you stone by merciless stone, finds his voice growing hoarse, his arguments losing their sharp edge against the growing wisdom of your acceptance. This is not the shadow's death, for the shadow never dies, never truly disappears into the light. Rather, this is its transformation, its slow evolution from destroyer to teacher, from tormentor to guide. Jung understood this sacred paradox, that the very forces within us that seem most destructive often carry the seeds of our greatest wisdom. The shadow speaks softer now because it no longer needs to shout to be heard. You have learned to listen. Incel. The mythology of your own becoming. You are witnessing the ancient dance of opposites that the alchemists called the conjunctio oppositorum, the marriage of contradictions that gives birth to wholeness. The fierce warrior who once battled every aspect of your darkness is laying down his sword, not in defeat but in recognition. The light and dark within you are no longer at war, but are learning the delicate steps of integration, moving together in a rhythm that honors both the beauty and the terror of human existence. Watch how the demons that once tormented your sleepless nights now appear as tired old actors, their masks slipping, their performances growing unconvincing even to themselves. They stumble over lines they once delivered with such conviction, their terrible authority diminished by your growing capacity to see them not as absolute truths, but as parts of yourself that learn to protect through destruction, to preserve through punishment. The shadow's softening voice carries within it the accumulated wisdom of every wound it has inflicted, every moment of self-sabotage it has orchestrated, every dream it has murdered in service of what it believed was protection. But protection from what? From the terrible vulnerability of being fully alive, fully present, fully yourself, in a world that demands conformity, that punishes authenticity, that rewards the carefully constructed persona over the wild truth of the soul. Now, in this quieter chamber of your psyche, you begin to hear what the shadow has been trying to tell you all along, beneath its harsh pronouncements and cruel judgments. It speaks of the parts of yourself you were taught to hide, the i.e. aspects of your nature that were deemed unacceptable by the collective consciousness that shaped your early years. It whispers of the dreams you buried, the passions you stifled, the authentic self you learned to keep locked away for fear it would not be loved, would not be accepted, would not be safe. The shadow's gentler voice reveals itself as the keeper of your disowned power, the guardian of qualities you learned to reject, but that were never truly evil, only inconvenient to those who needed you to be smaller, safer, more manageable. Your anger, which you learned to swallow until it turned poisonous. Your sexuality, which you learned to shame until it became twisted. Your ambition, which you learned to deny until it became self-sabotage. Your sensitivity, which you learned to armor until it became numbness. In this sacred integration, you discover that the shadow was never your enemy, but your wounded brother, your exiled sister, the part of yourself that took on the role of destroyer because it was the only way it knew to get your attention, to force you to acknowledge what you had abandoned, to demand that you reclaim what you had given away. The alchemists spoke of the nigredo, the black work, the descent into darkness that precedes transformation. You have been in that darkness, wrestling with these forces, and now you are witnessing the albedo, the whitening, the emergence of consciousness from the depths of the unconscious. The shadow speaks softer because it no longer needs to be your adversary. It has become your ally in the great work of becoming whole. This softening is felt in your body as a loosening of tension you didn't realize you were carrying. The shoulders that bore the weight of self-condemnation begin to drop. The jaw that clenched against your own harsh words begins to relax. The heart that armored itself against its own darkness begins to open to the possibility that even your most rejected aspects might have something sacred to offer. You notice how differently you respond to your own mistakes now, how the automatic cascade of self-punishment has been replaced by something more curious, more compassionate. The shadow's gentler voice asks not, "How could you be so stupid?" but what were you trying to achieve? What need were you attempting to meet? What wound were you trying to heal? This is the voice of integration, of wisdom born from the marriage of conscious and unconscious, of light and dark learning to dance together. The tired old actors of your inner theater are removing their masks, revealing themselves to be not monsters, but aspects of yourself that took on monstrous roles, because they thought it was the only way to be seen, to be heard, to matter. They are laying down their weapons because the war is over. The civil war within your psyche is giving way to a different kind of governance, not the tyranny of the ego over the shadow, but the democracy of the self, where all parts of you have a voice, a place, a purpose. In this new configuration of your internal world, you discover that wholeness was never about eliminating your darkness, but about embracing it consciously, about choosing how to relate to it rather than being unconsciously possessed by it. The shadow speaks softer because it no longer needs to possess you to be acknowledged. It can simply exist as part of the magnificent complexity of your human nature. This integration brings with it a profound relaxation, a deep exhale of the soul that has been holding its breath for decades. You realize that you have been fighting a war against yourself, and that every battle won by the light against the dark was also a battle lost, because you were simultaneously the victor and the vanquished, the hero and the villain, the one who conquered and the one who was conquered. Now, in this gentler landscape of the psyche, you discover that peace was always possible. Not through victory, but through understanding. Not through elimination, but through integration. Not through the triumph of good over evil, but through the recognition that both are necessary, both are you. Both are sacred threads in the tapestry of your becoming. The shadow's softer voice is the voice of your own wisdom, speaking from the depths of your experience, offering not condemnation but compassion, not judgment but understanding, not punishment but the gentle guidance of one who has walked this path and knows its dangers and its gifts. This is the voice of the wounded healer within you, the one who transforms suffering into wisdom, darkness into depth, rejection into integration. In the nocturnal theater of your unconscious, a profound awakening stirs. Your dreams, those faithful messengers from the deeper realms of psyche, begin to carry different cargo. Where once they delivered the repetitive freight of unresolved trauma, the same chase scenes, the familiar figures of dread, the endless variations on themes of powerlessness, now they arrive bearing gifts from the archetypal realm, symbols, pregnant with possibility rather than haunted by the past. This shift in your dream landscape signals something profound. Your unconscious is no longer primarily occupied with the urgent business of processing wounds. Instead, it has begun the sacred work of revelation, offering you glimpses of who you are becoming, rather than endless reminders of what you have been. Jung understood dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, but more than this, he recognized them as the psyche's attempt to balance our conscious limitations with the infinite wisdom of the deeper self. Notice how your sleep has become less restless, less populated by the urgent anxiety dreams that once jolted you awake in the pre-dawn darkness. The psyche's emergency broadcasting system has grown quiet, no longer needing to flood your nights with symbolic warnings about unintegrated shadow material or unresolved conflicts. This is not because you have solved all your problems, but because something more fundamental has shifted: your relationship to your own becoming. The dreams that come now carry the quality of ancient mythology, as if your personal unconscious has begun to commune directly with what Jung called the collective unconscious, that vast repository of human experience and archetypal wisdom that connects you to every soul who has ever undertaken the journey of individuation. You find yourself dreaming of vast landscapes, of journeys that stretch beyond the familiar geography of your personal history. Perhaps you dream of libraries filled with books written in languages you cannot read but somehow understand. Or you find yourself in conversation with figures who speak with the authority of ages, wise women whose eyes hold the depth of Earth's memory, ancient kings who offer you crowns you never thought you deserved. These are not random neuronal firings, but profound communications from the self, that central organizing principle of the psyche that Jung recognized as our truest guide toward wholeness. Your dreams begin to feature symbols of transformation, with increasing frequency. Butterflies emerging from cocoons, seeds cracking open in fertile darkness, rivers that flow upward toward impossible sources. These are not wishes but prophecies, not compensations for daily inadequacy, but glimpses of the archetypal process of becoming that moves through you like an underground river, finding its way to the surface. The snake appears in your dreams now, not as the threatening serpent of old fears, but as the Ouroboros of eternal renewal, the sacred symbol of death and rebirth that spirals through every authentic transformation. You dream of shedding skin without pain, of emerging from confining spaces with the ease of natural growth rather than the violence of escape. This is your psyche's way of showing you that healing need not be a battle, that growth can unfold with the organic inevitability of seasons. In the archaeology of these forgotten dreams, you excavate fragments of your own divinity. Dreams of flying return, not the desperate flight from pursuing terrors, but the effortless soaring of one who has remembered their essential freedom. You move through dream landscapes with increasing sovereignty, no longer a victim of dream. Circumstances but an active participant in the unfolding mystery of your own symbolic narrative. The prophetic quality of these dreams becomes unmistakable. You dream of doors opening into rooms you've never seen, but somehow recognize as home. You find yourself in conversations with your future self, receiving guidance from a version of you that speaks with quiet authority about paths not yet taken, choices not yet made. This is the self communicating across time, the eternal aspect of your being that exists beyond the linear constraints of biographical experience. Your dreams begin to weave together the disparate threads of your life experience into a coherent narrative of becoming. Childhood memories appear not as traumatic repetitions, but as golden threads in a larger tapestry. Old relationships resurface in dream, transformed from sources of pain into teachers offering their final gifts of wisdom before dissolving into the compassionate understanding that heals all wounds. The landscape of your dreams grows increasingly vast, as if your unconscious has remembered its cosmic inheritance. You find yourself standing on mountain peaks that stretch beyond the horizon of personal experience, swimming in oceans that connect to every body of water that has ever existed. This is the dream ego expanding to accommodate the reality of your larger self, the individual consciousness learning to breathe in the atmosphere of the eternal. Animals appear in your dreams with totemic significance, not as threats to be fled from, but as allies offering their particular wisdom. The wolf teaches you about loyalty to your true pack. The eagle shows you perspectives unavailable from ground level. The whale demonstrates the profound intelligence that moves through emotional depths. Each creature carries a fragment of the wholeness you are becoming, a piece of the ecological wisdom that your healing psyche seeks to integrate. Most remarkably, you begin to dream of creating, painting masterpieces with colors that don't exist. In waking life, composing symphonies that resonate with frequencies beyond the audible range, writing books that contain the secrets you didn't know you possessed. These creative dreams are not mere wish fulfillment, but glimpses of the generative capacity that emerges when the psyche is no longer primarily occupied with self-protection and survival. Your dreams become a laboratory for testing new ways of being, rehearsal spaces where you practice responses to life situations with unprecedented wisdom and compassion. You find yourself handling difficult conversations with grace, standing your ground without aggression, offering love without losing yourself. These dream rehearsals prepare your conscious mind for new possibilities, creating neural pathways for behaviors that align with your emerging wholeness. The golden thread of individuation weaves through every dream now, connecting past and future, wound and gift, human and divine. Your unconscious has become an artist, crafting nightly exhibitions that display the masterpiece you are becoming. Each dream adds another brushstroke to the portrait of your authentic self, another note to the symphony of your unique expression of the eternal human story. This archaeological dig through forgotten dreams reveals the treasures that have always been buried in the depths of your being. Not more problems to solve, but gifts to unwrap. Not more wounds to heal, but wings to unfurl. Your dream life has become a prophetic archive, storing visions of your becoming until your waking consciousness is ready to recognize and claim them. The seeds have indeed waited through winter's long sleep. Now they stir with the irrepressible life force of spring, sending up the first green shoots of a new season in the garden of your soul. A revolution stirs within you, but it carries none of the violent overtones that word might suggest. This is not the rebellion of the wounded ego, striking out in rage against a world that failed to recognize its worth. This is something far more profound and infinitely more dangerous to the old order of self-abandonment. the gentle insurrection of self-compassion, rising like dawn light that transforms the landscape not through force, but through the sheer persistence of its illumination. For so long, you lived as a faithful servant to the tyranny of others' expectations, offering yourself as sacrifice upon altar after altar, believing that your worth could only be earned through the exhausting currency of perpetual performance. You wore your people-pleasing like armor, not recognizing that it had become a prison, that the very thing you thought protected you from rejection had become the mechanism of your own self-rejection. But something fundamental has shifted in the deep structures of your being. Where once the word no felt like a foreign language you could never master, it now emerges from your lips with surprising naturalness. Not the defensive no of anger or resentment, but the sovereign no of one who has finally learned to distinguish between generous giving and compulsive self-betrayal. You notice this shift first in small moments, declining the dinner invitation that feels more like obligation than joy, stepping back from the conversation that demands you minimize yourself to make others comfortable, choosing the quiet evening at home over the social gathering that would require you to perform a version of yourself that no longer fits. These choices arise not from antisocial withdrawal, but from a deepening intimacy with your own inner rhythms, your own authentic needs and desires. Jung wrote extensively about the persona, that mask we construct to interface with the social world, the carefully curated self we present to gain acceptance and avoid rejection. For years, your persona had grown increasingly elaborate, a baroque construction of adaptations and accommodations that required enormous energy to maintain. You had become so skilled at reading others' expectations and molding yourself to meet them that you had forgotten the contours of your original face. But now, in this gentle rebellion, your persona begins to lighten, to become more transparent. Not discarded entirely, for we all need some interface with the social world, but worn more consciously, more selectively. You begin to recognize the difference between authentic adaptation and self-abandonment, between healthy social consciousness and the exhausting performance of an identity that was never truly yours. This shift manifests in 1,000 subtle ways. You find yourself pausing before automatically agreeing to requests, creating space to check in with your own truth before responding from the old patterns of compulsive yes-saying. You notice your body's wisdom asserting itself, the way your shoulders tense when you're about to abandon yourself, the way your breath deepens when you choose authenticity over acceptance. The guilt that once accompanied every act of self-preservation begins to lose its grip. Where saying no once triggered an avalanche of self-recrimination, I'm selfish, I'm disappointing them, I should be more giving. Now you find a growing capacity to hold your own needs with the same tenderness you've always reserved for others. This is not selfishness, but self-stewardship, not narcissism, but the healthy recognition that you cannot pour endlessly from an empty cup. Your relationships begin to shift in response to this inner revolution. Some connections, built primarily on your willingness to diminish yourself for others' comfort, start to feel strained. This can be disorienting at first, even painful, as you realize how many of your relationships were unconscious contracts of self-betrayal disguised as love. But other connections deepen and strengthen, as if they were waiting for your authentic self to show up so they could reveal their own genuine nature. You discover that authentic boundaries are not walls, but membranes, permeable barriers that allow love to flow while filtering out what would harm your essential nature. These boundaries arise naturally from self-knowledge rather than defensively from self-protection. They feel organic, even nurturing, like the bark of a tree that protects the tender-growing cambium while allowing the tree's essential nature to flourish. The rebellion extends to your relationship with solitude, where once you might have filled every quiet moment with activity or social contact. You now find yourself craving the spaciousness of your own company, not from social anxiety or withdrawal, but from a growing recognition that solitude is where you commune with your deepest self, where the voice of your authentic nature can speak without the interference of external expectations. In these moments of chosen solitude, you begin to discover aspects of yourself that had been overshadowed by your people-pleasing persona. Hidden interests emerge, creative impulses that had been buried under the weight of others' agendas. You find yourself drawn to activities that serve no purpose other than your own joy, your own curiosity, your own growth. This is not selfish indulgence but necessary archaeology, the excavation of your authentic self from beneath the sedimentary layers of adaptation. Your inner dialogue transforms as well. The harsh critic that once berated you for every failure to meet others' expectations begins to soften, replaced by an inner voice that speaks with the tone of a compassionate friend rather than a demanding taskmaster. You begin to extend to yourself the same understanding you've always offered others, recognizing that your needs and desires are not character flaws to be overcome, but essential guidance from your deeper wisdom. This compassionate rebellion ripples outward into every area of your life. You find yourself making choices based on what nourishes your soul rather than what gains you approval. Your career decisions begin to reflect your authentic values rather than external measures of success. Your creative expressions become more honest, more personal, even if they're less universally palatable. Your very presence in the world becomes more magnetic because it's more genuinely yours. The masks you've worn for so long don't shatter dramatically. They simply become increasingly transparent, allowing glimpses of the radiant authenticity that has always been your birthright. You're not becoming someone new. You're remembering who you've always been beneath the elaborate costumes of compliance and accommodation. This is the gentlest of revolutions because it's not fought against others but for yourself. It's not about rejecting the world, but about finally showing up authentically within it. The rebellion succeeds not through conquest, but through the simple, radical act of choosing yourself, not in opposition to others, but as the foundation from which genuine love and service can flow. Your authentic self emerges like a flower that has finally received the right conditions to bloom, not through violence or struggle, but through the patient, persistent choice to honor your own nature. The rebellion is complete not when you've overthrown all external authority, but when you've reclaimed the throne of your own inner kingdom. From the depths of your being, something ancient and knowing begins to rise, not built but remembered, not constructed but excavated from the bedrock of your essential nature. These are boundaries born not of defense but of reverence, not walls erected in fear, but sacred thresholds that honor the holy ground of your authentic self. For too long, you existed in a borderless landscape, your energy scattered like seeds. On barren ground, your attention pulled in directions that served everyone's needs but your own. You confused boundarylessness with love, believing that to be truly good, truly spiritual, truly worthy of acceptance, you must remain perpetually available, endlessly accommodating, infinitely adaptable to others' needs and expectations. But the psyche, in its infinite wisdom, recognizes what consciousness often forgets, that without sacred boundaries, the self dissolves into 1,000 fragments, each piece claimed by external demands, until nothing remains of the original wholeness. Jung understood this when he spoke of the necessity of withdrawing our projections, of recognizing where we end and others begin, of establishing the psychological boundaries necessary for individuation. Your new boundaries rise with the authority of geological time, like standing stones placed by ancient peoples to mark sacred sites. They emerge not from anger, though anger may have been the initial alarm system that alerted you to their necessity, but from a deeper recognition of your own inherent worth. These boundaries are not reactive, but responsive, not defensive, but definitional. They arise from self-knowledge rather than self-protection. You begin to sense these boundaries first as subtle shifts in your energetic field. Conversations that once left you drained now trigger an almost automatic response, a gentle but firm internal no that arises before your mind can rationalize it away. Your body becomes your ally in this process, offering clear signals when your boundaries are being crossed. The tightness in your chest when someone makes emotional demands you cannot meet. The heaviness in your stomach when you're being asked to abandon your own needs for another's comfort. This is the hermit's wisdom awakening within you. Not the hermit as misanthrope fleeing human connection, but the hermit as the archetypal figure who knows when to retreat into the sanctuary of self to tend the inner flame. Like the hermit in the tarot, holding aloft a lantern in the darkness, you're learning to illuminate your own path rather than constantly lighting the way for others at the expense of your own vision. Your boundaries become permeable membranes rather than impenetrable walls. They allow love to flow while filtering out what would diminish or drain your essential vitality. You discover that true boundaries are not about keeping others out, but about keeping yourself in, maintaining the integrity of your own energy field, the coherence of your own being, the sovereignty of your own soul. The guilt that once accompanied every act of self-preservation begins to transform into something more useful. Discernment. You recognize that saying yes when your deeper truth is no serves no one. Not you, certainly, but not others either. False yes-saying creates resentment, breeds inauthenticity, and ultimately offers others a diminished version of yourself rather than the full gift of your genuine presence. Your relationship with solitude deepens as these boundaries establish themselves. Where once you might have experienced alone time as loneliness, a lack to be filled, or a problem to be solved, you now recognize it as essential nourishment. Solitude becomes the sanctuary where you commune with your deepest self, where you can hear the subtle voice of your own wisdom beneath the cacophony of external demands and expectations. In this sacred solitude, you tend your inner flame with the devotion of a keeper of eternal fires. You recognize that this flame is not yours alone. It connects you to the eternal source of all illumination, the archetypal light that burns at the center of every authentic human being. But you also understand that this flame requires tending, that it can be scattered by too much external focus, dimmed by too much self-sacrifice, extinguished by too much accommodation to others' unconsciousness. Your boundaries begin to manifest in practical ways that surprise you with their naturalness. You find yourself ending phone calls when they shift from nourishing connection to energy-draining drama. You decline invitations that feel more like obligations than genuine desires. You step back from conversations that require you to minimize your own experience to validate another's emotional reactivity. These choices feel organic rather than forced, arising from an inner authority that you're only beginning to recognize as your own. This is not the authority of the ego, demanding recognition and deference, but the quiet authority of one who has learned to honor their own nature. It carries the same quality as the boundaries found in nature, the bark that protects the tree's growing edge, the membrane that maintains the cell's integrity while allowing essential nutrients to pass through. Your energetic field begins to feel more contained, less scattered. Where once your attention and concern extended into every corner of others' experience, worrying about their feelings, managing their reactions, taking responsibility for their healing, now you find a natural drawing inward, a gathering of your energy into your own center. This is not selfishness, but self-possession, not withdrawal, but wholeness. The ancient ground from which these boundaries rise is your recognition of your own inherent worth, not worth that must be earned through endless giving or proved through perpetual availability, but worth that exists as a fundamental fact of your being. This worth does not depend on others' approval or understanding. It exists independent of your usefulness to others, your ability to meet their needs, your willingness to sacrifice yourself for their comfort. You begin to understand that honoring your boundaries is itself a form of service, not only to yourself, but to the larger pattern of authenticity and consciousness that seeks to emerge through human relationships. When you honor your own limits, you invite others to honor theirs. When you speak your truth, you give others permission to find and speak their own. When you tend your inner flame, you contribute to the collective illumination. These sacred boundaries are not static structures but living entities that evolve with your growing self-knowledge. They flex and adjust as you deepen into your own authenticity, becoming more sophisticated in their discernment, more nuanced in their expression. They learn to distinguish between healthy challenges that promote growth and toxic intrusions that deprive you of essential vitality. The standing stones of your boundaries mark not the perimeter of a fortress, but the circumference of a temple, a sacred space where your authentic self can flourish, where your unique gifts can ripen, where your particular expression of the eternal human story can unfold without interference from unconscious projections or unexamined expectations. From this holy ground, you discover that you have more to offer, not less. The energy you once scattered across endless accommodations now gathers into focused presence. The attention you once fragmented among others' needs now concentrates into deeper compassion. The love you once gave from depletion now flows from abundance. Your boundaries have become the sacred architecture within which your truest self can finally emerge, flourish, and shine. In the quiet revolution of your healing, perhaps no transformation is more profound than this. The ordinary world begins to reveal its hidden sacredness. What was once merely routine, the morning ritual of coffee, the pause between breaths, the simple act of being alone with yourself, now carries the weight of revelation. This is the alchemical stage the ancients called albedo, the whitening, where the purified consciousness discovers that every moment contains within it the entire mystery of existence. You notice this shift first in the small ceremonies of daily life. The morning cup of coffee, once hurried fuel for the demands ahead, becomes a moment of communion. The steam rising from the cup seems to carry with it all the prayers you never knew you were praying. The warmth between your palms becomes a tangible reminder of life's simple gifts, the bittersweet taste a metaphor for the complex beauty of human experience. In this single cup you taste the rain that nourished the beans, the sun that ripened them, the hands that harvested them, an entire chain of being concentrated into this one perfect moment of presence. This is not sentimentality, but perception, cleansed of its habitual filters. Jung understood that the neurotic consciousness is characterized by its inability to remain present, its compulsive need to escape the immediacy of experience through fantasy, worry, or the endless mental rehearsals of past and future. But as healing deepens, consciousness naturally settles into the here and now, discovering that reality itself is far more interesting than any mental construction we might build to avoid it. Silence, once an uncomfortable void to be filled with, noise or activity, transforms into something substantial, almost touchable. You find yourself seeking these pockets of quiet with the devotion of a pilgrim approaching a shrine. In the spaces between words, between thoughts, between the constant demands of doing, you discover the profound rest of simply being. This silence is not empty, but full, pregnant with possibilities, rich with the presence that emerges when the mind stops its constant commentary on experience. Your relationship with solitude undergoes perhaps the most radical transformation. Where loneliness once felt like abandonment, a painful reminder of all the connection you lacked, solitude now reveals itself as wholeness itself. You begin to understand that the feeling of incompleteness you once attributed to being alone was actually the incompleteness that comes from being disconnected from yourself. In true solitude, you discover that you have never been alone at all, that you carry within you all the company you could ever need. This solitude becomes a sanctuary rather than a sentence. You find yourself creating rituals around it, lighting a candle before settling into your favorite chair, brewing tea with mindful attention, arranging flowers with the care of a temple keeper. These small acts transform your living space into sacred space, your ordinary time into holy time. The boundary between the secular and the sacred dissolves, revealing that it was always an artificial distinction. Walking becomes meditation, cooking becomes ceremony, cleaning becomes a form of prayer. The repetitive tasks that once felt like drudgery, washing dishes, folding laundry, tending to the endless small maintenances of daily life, begin to reveal their meditative potential. Your hands moving through warm, soapy water become instruments of mindfulness, each plate cleaned a moment of focused attention, each fold of cloth a gesture of care for the life you're creating. You discover that the profound has always been hiding in plain sight, disguised as the mundane. The way light falls across your kitchen table in the afternoon becomes a daily masterpiece, more moving than any painting because it's alive, changing, temporary. The sound of rain against your windows transforms from background noise into symphony, each drop a note in the eternal composition of becoming and dissolving that characterizes all existence. This stage of healing carries the quality of purification that the alchemists recognized as essential to the great work. But this is not purification as removal of impurities, it's purification as clarity of perception, the removal of the filters that obscure the inherent perfection of what is. You begin to see that the world has not changed. Your eyes have been washed clean of the accumulated dust of unconscious living. Even your breathing becomes a source of wonder. The simple miracle of air entering and leaving your body, the rhythm that has sustained you every moment of your life without your conscious effort, suddenly strikes you as profound beyond measure. Each breath becomes a reminder of your intimate connection to the living world, your participation in the great respiration of existence itself. Your senses sharpen and deepen as if a veil has been lifted from the world. Colors seem more vivid, not because they've changed, but because you're finally fully present to receive them. The texture of fabric under your fingers, the taste of simple food, the sound of your own heartbeat. All of these ordinary sensations carry an almost mystical intensity when met with complete presence. Sleep itself becomes sacred time. Instead of the unconscious escape it once represented, it transforms into a nightly journey into the deeper realms of psyche. You begin to approach bedtime with reverence, creating rituals of transition that honor the boundary between waking and sleeping consciousness. Your bedroom becomes a temple of rest, arranged with the same care you might give to a meditation space. The ordinary anxieties that once filled the spaces between activities begin to lose their grip. Waiting in lines, sitting in traffic, the inevitable delays and interruptions of daily life. These cease to be frustrations and become opportunities for presence. You discover that peace is not dependent on circumstances, but on the quality of attention you bring to whatever circumstances arise. This transformation extends to your relationship with objects. The things in your home begin to carry new weight, not as status symbols or mere utilities, but as companions in your daily journey. Each book on your shelf, each piece of art on your wall, each carefully chosen object becomes part of the sacred architecture of your life. You find yourself curating your environment with new consciousness, keeping only what truly supports your well-being and releasing what no longer serves. The medicine of ordinary moments works its healing through accumulation rather than intensity. Each small moment of presence, each brief communion with the sacred disguised as mundane, adds another drop to the reservoir of your transformed consciousness. Like homeopathic remedies that work through subtle influence rather than dramatic intervention, these micro-doses of presence gradually shift your entire relationship to existence. You realize that enlightenment, if it exists at all, is not a dramatic mystical experience, but this: the capacity to find the eternal within the temporal, the sacred within the ordinary, the profound within the simple act of being fully present to whatever life offers. The chrysalis of daily life has become the very place where your most essential transformation unfolds, one ordinary moment at a time. In the whitening of albedo, you discover that you need not seek the sacred. It has been seeking you all along, hiding in plain sight in the blessed ordinariness of being human. In the deepening chambers of your consciousness, an ancient voice begins to stir, not speaking in words but in the deeper language of knowing, not offering advice, but revealing wisdom that feels both utterly foreign and intimately familiar. This is the awakening of what Jung recognized as one of the most profound archetypes dwelling within the collective unconscious. The wise old man, the wise old woman, the eternal teacher who has been waiting patiently in the depths of your psyche for the moment when you would be ready to listen. You notice this emergence first in the quality of your decision-making, where once you sought validation from every available source, friends, family, experts, the endless scroll of opinions that populate your digital world, now you find yourself pausing, turning inward, consulting something deeper. It's not that you've become arrogant or dismissive of others' perspectives, but rather that you've discovered a reliable source of guidance that speaks in the voice of your own deepest knowing. This inner wisdom doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It emerges as a subtle shift in your internal dialogue, a quiet authority that speaks with the accumulated understanding of all your experiences, not just this lifetime's experiences, but something that feels connected to the eternal stream of human wisdom itself. When faced with choices, you find yourself less frantic, less desperate for external confirmation, more willing to sit in the silence and listen for what emerges from the depths. The mentor you have always sought, in teachers, in books, in spiritual leaders, in anyone who seemed to possess the answers you lacked, begins to reveal itself as an aspect of your own mature psyche. This is not the voice of the ego with its urgent demands and fearful projections, nor the critical inner parent with its harsh judgments and impossible standards. This is something older, deeper, more patient, a presence that has watched over your entire journey with the long view of one who understands that all experiences, even the most painful, serve the larger purpose of individuation. You recognize this voice first by its quality rather than its content. It speaks without urgency, offers guidance without attachment to outcomes, suggests rather than demands. When this inner wisdom emerges, you feel a settling in your nervous system, a recognition that you are no longer navigating life's complexities alone. The anxiety that once accompanied major decisions begins to soften, replaced by a trust in your own deep intelligence. This archetype often appears initially in your dreams, taking the form of an elderly figure who speaks with quiet authority about your path. Perhaps it's a grandfather you never knew offering cryptic but somehow perfectly clear advice, or an ancient woman whose eyes hold the wisdom of ages, or a figure from mythology who appears as naturally as an old friend. These dream encounters feel different from the usual symbolic communications of the unconscious. They carry the weight of direct transmission, as if some essential knowledge is being downloaded directly into your awareness. But more profoundly, this wisdom begins to speak through your intuition in waking life. You find yourself knowing things you have no logical way of knowing, sensing when someone is lying without being able to identify the specific cues that reveal it, understanding the deeper currents of situations that others see only on the surface, recognizing patterns and connections that your analytical mind hasn't yet processed. This is not psychic ability, but psychological sophistication, the fruit of a maturing consciousness that has learned to read the subtle signs that reveal the hidden dimensions of experience. Your relationship with uncertainty transforms under the influence of this inner wisdom. Where ambiguity once triggered anxiety and the compulsive need to force premature decisions, you now find a growing capacity to rest in not knowing, to trust that clarity will emerge when the time is right. This patience is not passive, but active, a calm, conscious choice to honor the natural timing of your own inner processes, rather than forcing resolution according to external pressures. The questions you ask yourself begin to change. Instead of, "What should I do?" you find yourself asking, "What does this situation want from me?" Instead of, "How can I get what I want?" you wonder, "What is trying to emerge through this experience?" Instead of, "Am I making the right choice?" you ask, "What choice honors my deepest truth?" These questions arise naturally from the wise mind within, which understands that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. Your inner wisdom reveals itself through what you don't do as much as what you do. You find yourself naturally stepping back from relationships and situations that once consumed your energy, not through dramatic confrontation, but through a gradual, organic disengagement. You stop trying to fix other people's problems, not from indifference, but from a deeper understanding that each person must find their own path to wholeness. You cease the exhausting effort to control outcomes, recognizing that your true power lies in how fully you show up to what is rather than how successfully you manipulate what might be. This archetypal wisdom speaks in paradoxes that your rational mind initially resists, but your deeper understanding embraces. It tells you to find strength in surrender, to discover freedom through acceptance, to locate power in vulnerability. These are not intellectual concepts, but lived truths that your inner wise one transmits through direct experience rather than explanation. The criticism and self-doubt that once dominated your inner landscape begin to quiet in the presence of this elder wisdom. Not because the wise archetype argues with your critical voices, but because its very presence reveals their relative insignificance. Like candle flames that seem bright in darkness but pale in sunlight, your harsh inner critics lose their power when met with the steady illumination of mature wisdom. You begin to recognize this voice not as something foreign that has invaded your consciousness, but as something that has always been there, waiting for you to develop enough psychological sophistication to hear it. It speaks with your voice but carries the authority of the ages. It knows your personal history intimately, but views it from the perspective of eternal patterns. It honors your individual journey while connecting you to the universal human story. Your conversations with this inner wisdom don't follow the format of question and answer, but unfold more like communion, a meeting of minds across the boundaries of conscious and unconscious, personal and archetypal, temporal and eternal. In these encounters, you don't receive specific instructions, but rather a transmission of understanding that reorganizes your entire approach to living. The validation you once sought from others becomes increasingly unnecessary as this internal source of wisdom establishes itself. You find yourself less concerned with whether others approve of your choices and more interested in whether those choices align with your deepest truth. This is not rebellious rejection of others' perspectives, but rather the natural result of having found a more reliable compass for navigation. The mentor dwelling within reveals itself to be not a separate entity, but your own consciousness matured through the alchemy of experience, refined through the fires of difficulty, seasoned by the long contemplation of what it means to be human. The wise old man, the wise old woman, these are not figures from fairy tales, but the natural result of a psyche that has learned to transform suffering into wisdom, experience into understanding, living into the art of being fully human. In the deepening dialogue with this eternal aspect of yourself, you discover that you have never been as alone as you believed, never been as lost as you feared, never been as far from wisdom as you imagined. In the deepest chambers of your transformation, you encounter one of the most profound teachers on the path of individuation, uncertainty itself, that dark angel who arrives not to torment, but to liberate you from the prison of false certainties. What once felt like the ground dissolving beneath. Your feet now reveals itself as the fertile void from which new possibilities are born. The terror that once accompanied not knowing begins its slow metamorphosis into something unrecognizable. The electric thrill of infinite potential. This shift doesn't happen overnight, nor does it announce itself with clarity. It emerges gradually, like your eyes adjusting to darkness until you begin to discern shapes and shadows that were always there, waiting for your vision to adapt. The familiar panic that once arose when facing ambiguous situations, the racing heart, the mental scrambling for premature answers, the desperate grasping for any certainty to anchor yourself, these responses begin to soften, replaced by something that feels almost like curiosity. You start to recognize uncertainty not as a problem to be solved, but as a natural state to be inhabited. Like a traveler learning to appreciate the journey rather than fixating solely on the destination, you discover that the spaces between knowing and not knowing contain their own particular wisdom. This is the nigredo stage of the alchemical process, not the crude blackening of despair, but the fertile darkness that precedes new growth, the necessary decomposition that creates the soil for transformation. The paradoxes that once tormented your rational mind with their refusal to resolve into neat categories begin to feel less like contradictions and more like dance partners. You can hold love and loss simultaneously, can feel grateful for painful experiences, can embrace both your light and shadow without the compulsive need to choose between them. This capacity to contain opposites without forcing resolution is what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold tension until a third option emerges that honors both poles while transcending their apparent conflict. Your relationship with mystery undergoes a profound transformation. Where the unknown once represented danger, threat, the possibility of catastrophic outcomes, it now carries the quality of adventure. You begin to approach unclear situations with something resembling excitement rather than dread, recognizing that uncertainty is where creativity lives, where innovation emerges, where the genuinely new becomes possible. The mystery stops being your enemy and reveals itself as a strange, complex friend who offers gifts wrapped in packages you don't immediately recognize. This shift manifests in countless small ways. When someone asks what you want from life, you find yourself comfortable saying, "I don't know yet," and that's okay. When faced with decisions that have no clearly superior option, you learn to choose from intuition rather than analysis, trusting that the right path will reveal itself through walking rather than thinking. When plans fall through or circumstances change unexpectedly, you discover an increasing capacity to meet these disruptions with flexibility rather than frustrated rigidity. The dark angel of uncertainty teaches you that your need for control was itself a form of imprisonment. All those carefully constructed plans, the detailed scenarios you played out in your mind, the elaborate strategies for avoiding unwanted outcomes, they were barriers to experiencing the full richness of life's unscripted possibilities. In learning to dance with uncertainty, you discover a freedom you never knew you were missing. The freedom to be surprised by life, to be changed by experiences you couldn't have planned, to become someone you couldn't have imagined. Your relationship with fear undergoes a subtle but profound shift. You begin to distinguish between the fear that protects, the instinctual response to genuine danger, and the fear that imprisons, the ego's desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of control. The latter begins to lose its grip as you develop what spiritual traditions call the wisdom of insecurity, the recognition that all security is ultimately illusory, and that true peace comes from making friends with impermanence rather than fighting it. This transformation reveals itself in your dream life as well, where uncertainty once manifested as nightmares of endless falling or being lost in dark labyrinths. Your dreams now feature vast open spaces, doorways leading to unknown or but inviting territories, journeys that feel adventurous rather than threatening. Your unconscious mind has begun to associate the unknown with possibility rather than peril, mystery with adventure rather than anxiety. You discover that uncertainty has its own intelligence, its own timing, its own way of resolving situations that your conscious mind could never have orchestrated. Opportunities arise from unexpected directions. Solutions emerge from sources you never would have considered. Connections form in ways that reveal the hidden patterns underlying apparent chaos. You begin to trust what the Taoists call Wu Wei, the principle of non-forcing, of allowing life's natural intelligence to work through you, rather than constantly struggling to impose your will upon circumstances. The compulsive need to know what's coming next, to have all variables accounted for, to live according to predetermined plans, gradually releases its hold on your nervous system. You find yourself capable of making major life decisions based on incomplete information, not from recklessness, but from a growing trust in your ability to adapt, to learn, to respond creatively to whatever emerges. This is not passive resignation, but active engagement with the creative uncertainty that characterizes all authentic living. Your conversations change as you become more comfortable with not having all the answers. You stop pretending to know more than you do, stop offering premature solutions to complex problems, stop rushing to fill uncomfortable silences with reassuring platitudes. Instead, you learn to say, "I don't know," with the same authority you once reserved for your most certain proclamations. This honesty creates space for genuine dialogue, for collaborative exploration, for the kind of creative problem-solving that can only emerge when multiple perspectives are allowed to interact without being forced into premature synthesis. The dark angel of uncertainty reveals its greatest gift in the realm of relationships. As you become more comfortable with your own unknown aspects, you naturally extend the same acceptance to others' mysteries. You stop trying to figure people out completely, stop demanding that they be consistent or predictable, stop needing them to fit the categories your mind creates. This allows for deeper intimacy, paradoxically, as people feel safe to reveal their authentic complexity in the presence of someone who doesn't need them to be simple or easily understood. You begin to recognize uncertainty as the space where love lives, not the easy love that flows toward what we already understand and approve of, but the courageous love that extends itself toward the unknown aspects of others and ourselves. In this space of not knowing, empathy flourishes because it's no longer constrained by preconceptions. Creativity explodes because it's not limited by predetermined outcomes. Authentic relationship becomes possible because it's no longer filtered through the need to control or predict. The fertile darkness of uncertainty reveals itself as the womb of all becoming. Like seeds that must first dissolve in the earth's darkness before they can reach toward light, your old identity must enter the unknown territory of transformation before your authentic self can emerge. The dark angel has been your guide all along, leading you not toward destruction, but toward the kind of death that makes rebirth possible, the dissolution of who you thought you were, so that who you truly are can finally be born. In learning to dance with uncertainty, you discover that you have been dancing all along. Life itself is improvisation, and you are finally learning to trust your own rhythm. Something has shifted in the very fabric of your existence, subtle yet undeniable as the change of seasons. Your authentic self, that essential core that has been quietly emerging through the long process of healing, begins to exert its own magnetic influence on the world around you. Like a tuning fork that has found its true pitch, you now resonate at a frequency that calls forth experiences and relationships aligned with your deepest nature. The universe, it seems, has been waiting for you to remember who you are, so it could respond accordingly. This transformation reveals itself first in the quality of what enters your life. Where once you seemed to attract drama, crisis, relationships, that required you to heal or fix or rescue, now you find yourself naturally drawing connections that nourish rather than deplete, opportunities that expand rather than diminish, experiences that support your growth rather than test your endurance. It's as if you've changed radio stations. Suddenly, you're receiving broadcasts from an entirely different realm of possibility. Jung understood this phenomenon as synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that reveal the deep interconnectedness between psyche and world, inner transformation and outer circumstance. But more than mere coincidence, these synchronistic events signal that you have achieved a fundamental alignment between your inner truth and your outer expression. The mask has become transparent enough that your authentic self can shine through, calling forth responses from a universe that speaks in the language of resonance and attraction. You notice this shift in the most practical ways. Conversations that once felt forced now flow with natural ease. You find yourself in the right place at the right time with increasing frequency, not through careful planning, but through following your genuine impulses and interests. Opportunities arise that seem tailor-made for your particular combination of gifts and passions. Books find their way into your hands precisely when their wisdom is most needed. People appear in your life who see and appreciate qualities in you that you're only beginning to recognize yourself. This magnetic quality of authentic being operates on principles that defy conventional logic. You're not trying harder, pushing more, or strategizing more cleverly than before. If anything, you're making less effort in the traditional sense. But the effort you do make is aligned with your true nature rather than opposed to it. Like a river that has stopped fighting its banks and learned to flow with the natural contours of the landscape. Your relationships undergo a profound reorganization. Connections based on mutual wounding, codependency, or the complex dance of projection and rescue begin to naturally fade. Not through dramatic confrontation or conscious rejection, but through the organic process of growing apart as you grow into yourself. Meanwhile, new relationships enter your field with a quality of recognition, as if you've been waiting for these particular souls all along. These connections feel effortless, not because they require no work, but because the work feels nourishing, rather than draining. The old pattern of attracting what you needed to heal served its purpose during the initial stages of your journey. Those challenging relationships, difficult circumstances, and painful experiences were your teachers, offering you the exact curriculum your soul required to learn the lessons of boundary setting, self-worth, and authentic expression. But now, having integrated those lessons, your magnetic field has shifted from a healing frequency to a growth frequency, from attracting what you need to heal to magnetizing what supports your continued evolution. This shift manifests in your professional life as well, where once you might have attracted demanding bosses who triggered your people-pleasing patterns, or chaotic work environments that mirrored your inner turbulence, now you find yourself naturally gravitating toward roles and colleagues that honor your authentic gifts. Your work begins to feel less like something you endure and more like something you're called to contribute. The intersection of your deepest talents and the world's genuine needs reveals itself with increasing clarity. Your authentic magnetic field operates through what you might call selective attraction. Like a sophisticated filter, it draws toward you what resonates with your true nature, while naturally repelling what would diminish or distract from your essential self. This isn't a conscious process of acceptance and rejection, but an unconscious alignment that happens at the level of energy and intention. Your very presence becomes an invitation to others to show up authentically, creating a field of permission for genuine connection. The synchronicities that begin to populate your experience carry a quality of rightness that's unmistakable. A chance encounter leads to a meaningful friendship. A book recommendation opens a door to new understanding. A delayed flight results in meeting someone who changes your perspective on a crucial life decision. These events feel neither random nor forced but inevitable, as if they were always meant to happen once you reach this particular frequency of being. Your intuition becomes increasingly reliable as this magnetic field establishes itself. You find yourself making decisions that your rational mind can't fully justify, but that prove to be perfectly aligned with your unfolding path. You say yes to invitations that lead to unexpected opportunities. You decline offers that seem attractive on the surface, but feel wrong at a deeper level. This intuitive navigation system operates like an internal GPS that has finally acquired a clear signal after years of static and confusion. The authentic self that emerges through this process is not the ego-driven personality that demands attention and validation, but something more subtle and powerful, the individuated self that Jung described as the goal of human development. This self doesn't need to prove itself or compete for recognition because it knows its own worth. It doesn't need to manipulate outcomes because it trusts the natural intelligence of life to provide what's needed for continued growth. Your creative expressions begin to carry this magnetic quality as well. Whether through art, writing, conversation, or simply your way of being in the world, you find that your authentic creations touch others in ways that your more calculated efforts never did. This is because authentic expression carries the frequency of truth, and truth has its own power to move and inspire others. Your creativity becomes less about impressing others and more about giving form to what wants to emerge through you. The magnetic field of authentic being also attracts what you need to know when you need to know it. Information, insights, and wisdom arrive through various channels, conversations, media, direct experience, precisely when your consciousness is prepared to receive and integrate them. This creates a sense of being guided or supported by some invisible intelligence that knows your path better than your conscious mind ever could. Perhaps most remarkably, you begin to attract mirrors, people and situations that reflect back to you aspects of your own transformation that you might not have fully recognized. Through others' responses to your authentic presence, you discover qualities in yourself that were previously hidden. Someone mentions your wisdom, and you realize you've been speaking from a deeper knowing. Someone comments on your peace, and you recognize the stillness that has been growing within you. This magnetic field creates a feedback loop of authenticity. As you express your true nature more fully, the world responds with increasing alignment. As the world responds with alignment, you feel safer expressing your true nature even more fully. This creates an upward spiral of authenticity that draws you deeper into your own becoming, while simultaneously drawing toward you everything you need to support that becoming. You discover that authentic being is not a destination but a way of traveling, not a fixed state, but a dynamic process of continual alignment between inner truth and outer expression. The magnetic field that surrounds you now is not something you created, but something you uncovered. Your natural state of being, finally free to operate without the interference of false identity and unconscious patterns. The universe, it turns out, was always eager to support your authentic expression. It was simply waiting for you to remember who you truly are. From the ashes of your former exhaustion, a new quality of energy begins to emerge, not the frantic vitality of forced enthusiasm or the borrowed fire of external stimulation, but something deeper, more sustainable, carrying the unmistakable frequency of resurrection. This is the phoenix rising, not in the dramatic burst of flame that mythology suggests, but in the quiet, steady warmth of a life force that has learned to draw from inexhaustible sources. You recognize this shift first in the quality of your daily energy. Where once you oscillated between periods of manic intensity and complete depletion, riding the roller coaster of caffeine, adrenaline, and willpower, now you discover a more constant, reliable current of vitality. It's as if you've learned to tap into a deeper aquifer, one that doesn't depend on external circumstances or chemical enhancement, but flows from some eternal spring within your being. This energy carries a different signature than anything you've experienced before. It lacks the urgency of anxiety-driven productivity, the brittle intensity of performance-based achievement, the desperate quality of energy borrowed against future reserves. Instead, it feels organic, renewable, like the steady power of a river that flows not from accumulated rainfall, but from an underground source that never runs dry. The Phoenix frequency manifests first in your relationship to rest. Sleep becomes truly restorative rather than merely the exhausted collapse that punctuated your previous patterns of depletion. You wake not from the heavy stupor of someone who has used sleep to escape consciousness, but with the clear-eyed vitality of one whose rest has genuinely regenerated their life force. Your dreams during this period often feature images of renewal, gardens blooming after long drought, fires that warm rather than consume, light that illuminates rather than blinds. Your body begins to remember its natural rhythms, no longer requiring the constant external inputs that once kept you functioning. The endless cycle of stimulants to wake up and depressants to calm down gradually becomes unnecessary as your nervous system finds its own equilibrium. You discover energy reserves you had forgotten existed, not the desperate last gasps of a depleted system, but the steady power of one that has learned to work in harmony with, rather than opposition to its natural design. This transformation extends to your emotional energy as well. Where once you might have exhausted yourself in the endless drama of other people's problems, absorbing their anxiety, taking on their emotional labor, losing yourself in the turbulent waters of unconscious relationship dynamics, now you find yourself capable of caring without depleting yourself. Your compassion becomes more spacious, less reactive, powered by the deep well of self-love rather than the shallow pools of people-pleasing. The Phoenix frequency carries within it the wisdom of death and rebirth. Having moved through the necessary dissolution of old patterns, old identities, old ways of being that no longer served your authentic nature, you now emerge with the integrated strength of one who has survived their own psychological death and discovered that what they feared losing was never essential to begin with. This gives your energy a quality of fearlessness, not the reckless courage of one who has never been wounded, but the steady confidence of one who has been wounded and healed. Your creative energy undergoes perhaps the most dramatic transformation. Where once creativity felt like something you had to force, steal time for, or wait for inspiration to grant you, now it flows as naturally as breathing. This is because your creative expression is no longer fighting against the current of an inauthentic life, but aligned with the deep flow of your true nature. The energy you once scattered across countless directions now focuses like a laser, capable of sustained creative effort that feels nourishing rather than depleting. You begin to understand that energy is not something you have, but something you are. The vital force that animates your being is not separate from your consciousness, but the very substance of your awareness itself. This recognition shifts your entire relationship to energy from one of management and conservation to one of alignment and expression. You stop trying to gather energy from external sources and start learning to remove the obstacles that block your connection to the infinite energy of existence itself. The Phoenix frequency reveals itself in your capacity for sustained presence. Where once you might have been able to offer your full attention for only brief periods before becoming distracted, depleted, or overwhelmed, now you find yourself capable of showing up fully for extended periods without experiencing the familiar drain. This is because presence itself has become energizing rather than exhausting. When you're aligned with your authentic nature, being fully present becomes a source of vitality rather than a demand upon it. Your relationship to challenge transforms under the influence of this new energy. Where difficulties once felt like assaults upon your limited reserves, now they feel more like opportunities to discover the depth of your resilience. Not because you've become masochistic or addicted to struggle, but because you've learned that authentic challenges, those that call forth your growth rather than drain your essence, actually increase your energy rather than deplete it. This sustainable vitality manifests in your daily choices as well. You find yourself naturally gravitating toward activities, foods, relationships, and environments that support your energy rather than tax it. This isn't a conscious strategy, but an organic response to having learned the difference between what truly nourishes and what merely stimulates. Your body's wisdom, no longer overridden by mental demands and social expectations, begins to guide you toward what genuinely serves your well-being. The Phoenix frequency carries with it a quality of timelessness. Your energy no longer feels borrowed against future reserves or dependent on past accumulations, but connected to something eternal. This gives your actions a quality of sustainability that was missing before. You can commit to long-term projects without the anxiety of running out of steam, can show up consistently in relationships without fear of depletion, can face uncertainty without the terror of not having enough resources to handle whatever comes.